you might know her from Cheddar Esports. She also hosts the Grassroots Pod. Her name is Erin Ashley Simon, and I'm Ayan.
Oh no. Well, I guess I'll add on to it. Froze a little bit over here. But like I said, everyone, my name is Erin Ashley Simon. I do hosting, broadcasting, producing work as well. And I'm really excited for this. And I'm really looking forward to just answering questions and just talking about my experience in this space. So as we get her back in order, how are you guys doing? Everyone doing well? I think this is amazing. It's so important that we not only help to educate and let people know about Juneteenth, but also utilize our platforms to speak up on important matters and do as much as we can to inform people when it comes to things like Juneteenth, or just even as myself being a Black woman in esports and being in this space. And yeah, this is, listen, this happens with remote broadcasts. We're going to get it together over here. But if you guys have any questions too, feel free to drop it in the stream. And I'll try to answer it within some of the questions that she has. And I hope you guys are all having a really good day so far. It's been quite an experience. I guess I'll do a little bit, just an intro conversation. I mean, for me, being a Black woman in esports and especially in the broadcasting space, it's very, let me see. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Being a woman in the broadcast space is, it's been rewarding, but also it's been a little bit difficult too, because in most broadcasts, I'm the only woman of color sometimes, and also I may be the only Black woman. So it is kind of like one of those things where you stand out, but then also it's kind of one of those things where you deal with some difficult moments, especially when it comes to broadcasts. And so that's also a whole thing in itself. Yeah, it's okay, guys. Listen, these things happen. There's no perfect broadcast at all. There's no perfect broadcast. If you think the broadcast goes well, you really don't know what happens behind the scenes, because I've had broadcasts where literally my teleprompter shut off and I had to just improv and continue on. But you'll never know, because we have to practice and train to fill in this time. Oh, we got you back. Hey, there you go.
Yeah, so
filling in the time as much as I could.
I don't know if you guys heard the thunder, but that may have been the issue. So I'm back. But yeah, sorry about that.
Like I said, there's always tech issues.
Yeah, thank you, and sorry about that. I think I got through your introduction. Where did I leave off before I left?
Well, I mentioned, obviously I work in esports broadcasting as a host and, as a producer. Just briefly mentioned that, being a Black woman in esports is, it's something that it has me stand out, and it's a uniqueness to my career and job. But then also there comes hardships, because there have been times where I'm literally the only Black woman or the only person of color on the talent team. And so that's kind of where I was. And then I also just mentioned that if anyone has any questions, that they can put in the Twitch chat. So there's a way for me to integrate that question to what you ask. I'll try my best to do that.
Yeah, thank you. So I wanted to bring up, because you brought up your broadcasting career and your career as a TV host. You've definitely interviewed some really big guests. I remember that before I appeared on Cheddar, you were talking with Gary Vee and Chief Keef about his gaming stuff, and a few other people, and you've also been on ESPN. Have you ever felt imposter syndrome from all these big names that you've been involved in, and how were you able to overcome something like that?
I think that, the imposter syndrome part comes with the fact that, when I got into broadcasting, I didn't major in broadcasting. I majored in digital and print. And this was something that I was always interested in doing and be a part of. But it was always that question, am I good enough? And I feel like that is a question, especially being someone who's Black and even a person of color. I feel like that's a question that we constantly go through. Also, sometimes there are moments, I would say, of guilt that you feel when, and it's not like you yourself put that upon yourself, but it's like there are moments where you, like I said, you're going to be the only Black person, the person of color. And sometimes you may be the only one that's getting a lot of different opportunities. And there's this little sense of guilt where it's like, wow, like all these opportunities, I'm getting, and like, it's like you feel bad because there are other people who are working hard and who also have earned and deserve those opportunities. To remind myself that I've put in a lot of work, and I've been in the media world for 10 years. I'm 28. So I started when I was about 16, 17 years old. So, 11 years. And I've been doing this work for such a long time. And I just have to remind myself that, no, Erin, you are good enough. Like, you've worked your butt off to get to this point, and you put in the hours. And even though some people may not see the 10, 11 years that you've gone through, you've done a lot. And so, this is your time to shine. But the one thing I always try to do too is, even when I receive these opportunities, or even when I have these imposter syndromes where it's like, I may not feel like I'm doing a really, really great job. I think that, one, I've done a lot of self-care. So going to therapy, I'm a big advocate of therapy, meditation. And also I do things that have, like, I always make sure to, I make sure to have my circle of friends and close people be people who are supportive. I think throughout the years, I've removed certain people that just weren't supportive. It's kind of like that saying, like, if you have, if you have 5 intelligent people around you, you will naturally end up being the 6th person. If you have 5 kind people around you, you'll end up being the 6th one. So
I've heard that saying a few times.
Yeah, so I make sure to include people in my surroundings who were either very driven like I am and determined, who were already successful. And I always make sure to keep people in my circle who are smarter than I am at something else. And so I do that to always keep myself working hard and doing better. But then also sometimes I got to tell myself, Erin, relax. You worked your butt off. You earned this. So enjoy this. And then I also find ways to take my wins and then use my wins to help others as well. Because, I view my wins as kind of like opening up doors, right? The more wins that I have, that I open up these doors, I'm opening up more doors for those who are coming after me, especially Black women coming after me. And so and it's funny because I look up to someone like Serena Williams, who her and her sister did the same thing in terms of tennis. And so when I have these moments of challenges and obstacles, I always think, like, listen, it's not just about getting these dubs for myself. It's about getting these wins, getting these doors open so that the younger kids and those who are coming after me, and even like my kids, can have a better chance and better opportunity within this space.
Yeah, so that's really awesome. And I think you also addressed, like, how important it is to extend what you have beyond into future generations. And I think that one thing that I noticed that kind of stood out in your answer is, I was thinking about how this would translate over into gaming communities, because women in gaming communities, we often get gamer checked. So if you don't know what gamer checking is, it means when someone kind of asks you to verify your knowledge on a certain subject, if you're a woman, because women can't possibly know anything about games or the history of games. So do you have any unique stories where this happened to you in gaming?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. So I'm going to answer that. And then I also see that AMD asked actually a question about how can Black men in esports, what can they do to support Black women in esports and gaming? So I'm going to tie that into my answer for this. And yeah, I constantly get, and it's mostly, honestly, it's mostly for men. I never get a credibility question when it comes from women. It's always men who do that. And so, but also there's this thing where people perceive that, like, if you're a woman, you're a gamer, it's like, oh, what do you like Candy Crush, or is it Fortnite? And I'm like, no, I was playing Metal Gear Solid. I played a lot of the Final Fantasy series. Like, what are you even talking about? And so, there's still that credibility and stereotype that people have in the industry. And so I dealt with that. And I dealt with that the entire time I worked in this industry. I would say more so now, I don't get it as much just because it sucks that as a woman, and especially as a Black woman, it sucks that you have to get a cosign of a man to get other men to stop saying that crap. It sucks. But unfortunately, that's part of it. And I dealt with the same thing when I worked in traditional sports, and I dealt with the same thing when I worked in music media. It's this unfortunate cycle that if you are a woman, you yourself can't possibly know about certain games and certain aspects of the industry as well as the male counterparts, right? There's also credibility with, being a person of color. There's always this association that, oh, you're a console gamer. So there's this whole PC versus console gamer thing. And it's like, oh, you possibly can't be good at the game. That's another thing too. People assume that I'm not good at the game. And a lot of times it's the guys are saying that, but it's funny because every time I play Call of Duty, I'm always at the top of the leaderboard. So it's funny because even some of my guy friends are like, yo, Erin, you carry us. So it's an unfortunate thing that happens. Now, in terms of the Black men supporting the Black women in this space, going with this, definitely check the guys who are the ones that are constantly asking for women to give more of their resume and credentials than they do the men. Check them because they should not be doing that just because it's a woman, and especially should not be doing that if it's a Black woman, because there's also this weird notion that like Black people don't play other games more than just FGC titles and sport games. That. And it's like, no, we play all sorts of games. And it blows my mind considering that, especially the Black community, and even more specifically hip hop tied to Black community, we've been associated with the gaming industry for a long time. And even like some of the earliest developers, one was a guy named Ed, and he was a Black man. And then of course, Jerry Lawson's another one. So we've always been a part of this industry. So why are you questioning whether we play certain games, and why you question my credibility? And so, and it's crazy that happens, considering that there are a lot of women behind the scenes and a lot of women in executive positions, decision-making positions, and PR positions, and they're women in the industry. So it's like, if you outwardly are saying this publicly, you do know that can hurt you from getting a career in this space. And I honestly, for me, like, if that's how you think, then I don't want you in a career space at this point. So definitely, like, as a Black man, like, check those men who ask for these additional credentials and have women go through certain hoops and hurdles just to show that they know what they're talking about. Obviously, you want to give everyone the same credibility and level of chance to prove their knowledge and information, but don't put women through extra, as a guy. And for the Black men, check. Also, Black men, if there's ever any opportunities that you see, whether it's for a speaking engagement or whether it is for a panel or a job, highlight women, Black women who would be great for it. A lot of times, like for example, when I did Cheddar Esports, and this was something that kind of stuck with me and bothered me. You know how I used to be like, hey guys, does anyone know, someone in this? Like, do you know someone in the LGBT+?
Yeah, you would get people to tweet tag. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, people do tweet tag because, I'm not going to know everyone in the space, right? It's just impossible for us to all know every single person. But I would do that to see who are some really cool people with cool stories with Cheddar Esports. What really stuck with me and it kind of bothered me was that for Women's History Month, most of the women that were recommended were white women. There was
that's an important thing to bring up.
Yeah, there were less women of color that were brought up, and especially even fewer Black women that were brought up. So if there's ever an opportunity, like, highlight the Black women in this space, support them. If someone's asking for recommendations, bring their names up, right? It's so important because we already don't get as much opportunities and exposure being Black and being people of color. And there's even less I've seen in terms of Black women in certain capacities. So do whatever you can to support and also shut down anyone who's being racist or sexist, shut that down. Do not allow that continue to happen. So those are definitely some ways that you can support. Of course, there's other ways too, as well.
Yeah, so we brought up like sexism, and you mentioned that a lot of the times when people were referring people, they would be a certain type of women. And I think that's fine because we should be uplifting women as much as we're uplifting ourselves. But it's also hurtful because there are a lot of women of color in the space who aren't recognized, and there's a lot of Black women in the space who aren't recognized, and I don't see them getting the same recommendations or credibility associated with their names. I wanted to really bring up that is there anything that you've noticed that you've had to do to kind of modify your attitude? Because I can be quite a bit of a bold speaker sometimes, and I would have to kind of adjust how I talk to people so that I don't sound angry. Some people refer to it as code switching. Some people call it something else, but because of who I am and because of how few Black women are in the community, people would consider it, oh, she's being angry, or she's being sassy, or she's giving a lot of attitude. And that's something that I heard a lot. Like, people would think it's acceptable to say, hey, you're being kind of like bitchy. And I just wondered, is there anything that you've found yourself over accommodating for?
Well, I mean, even before that, I've been someone who understands that everyone has different communication skills, and everyone has, ways of communicating that's different. Me being an Aries, I'm very blunt and forward. So I've learned how to learn people's styles. It's funny because it's this can be really weird to mention, but I think it's important. So you know how everyone has different love languages, right?
Yeah.
With that, everyone has different love languages and how they receive love and how they give love. It's the same way that's with communication. Everyone has different ways that they communicate and receive communication. So it's so important that, on this is more on the positive side. I take the time to get to know people on a deeper level, so I learn how to communicate properly with them. There's some people that I could literally message and be like, hey, this was really bad. We need to do better. And they'll take that and be fine. And there's some people that I have to like take a little more time, like breaking things down and give my thoughts and feelings, and maybe start off with saying like, asking them about, a recipe that they had, and then getting into the problem. Like, there's different ways. So I learned that instantly, because me being Aries, I was raised by a New Yorker. So add like extra level of bluntness to that. So I had to learn that, right? But in terms of the angry Black woman, the one thing that my mom always told me, one, she's never show emotion in front of them, because that shows that they have power. So even if I'm pissed off or upset, I still always talk with a calm voice. Now, there are some times where I've been in moments where someone was being so ridiculous and I had to snap on them, because I don't tolerate disrespect. I'm a very nice person. But the second you step out of line or disrespectful to me, a whole different Erin's going to come out. The New York Erin's going to come out. But what I will say is I've learned that you can't show emotion. And unfortunately, part of it is going back to they will instantly associate you with the angry Black woman. I'm someone who I like to call myself a receipts woman. If I ever speak to someone
yes.
and if they ever try to claim that I'm an angry Black woman, I always have receipts. I keep copies of every text message, every DM, every email. So if someone says, oh, you're over exaggerating or anything like that, I'm like, really? Because on January 12th at 6 p.m., you emailed me this specific sentence, and I'll screenshot it. And I'd be like, so how am I over exaggerating? The one thing is you have to have receipts. It sucks. We have to do more, but sometimes they will utilize, oh, you're an angry Black woman, or you're too difficult to deal with, and you're not. And I had that. I'll even tell a story.
Yes,
I was part of a broadcast, and I was made aware that they didn't like the fact that I didn't go through them to do an appearance on a show. Now, mind you, I don't work for them. I'm contracted to work with them. I worked at the time for Cheddar. And quite frankly, I am a contractor, so I work for myself. So they tried to bring up the fact that I wasn't appreciative and I was difficult. And I didn't do things like say thank you, which is complete false, because I have receipts of me saying, I'm always saying thank you. Like, for someone to say that doesn't fit through with my character. But as you work in this industry, you have to understand not everyone's going to be your friend. There are going to be people who hate you, and there's going to be people who are going to try to have any kind of justification why you can't work with them. That's just how it is. The same way that people have been trying to do justifications for the police brutality that's been happening and how that as a societal thing, they do that. Oh, the police killed him. Oh, well, he had a record. The same thing happens in the workspace, unfortunately. But
that's whataboutism.
Yeah, it's the whataboutism, but you can't stoop low to them. And having the receipts only makes them look like a fool at the end of the day. And so that's why it's so important. No matter what job you do, always keep receipts. If there's ever an incident with someone, have a journal, write down that journal, and specifically state what that person did, what that person said. Also, another thing too is if you can record them, certain states allow you to record without letting them know in advance. Look up your state laws, because in New York, you're allowed to record a conversation without notifying the other person. So if for some reason later on they try to say oh, you're angry or you're difficult, or even something to the extent of trying to fire you for something that's not justified, you have the receipts to prove that is not the case. And unfortunately, we have to do this extra stuff as Black women, as Black people, and people of color, because there's just some people that just don't want to work with us. And honestly, there are some people in the industry who are racist. So
yeah,
that's why,
absolutely.
I try to navigate by doing some of these things to make sure I can really handle with some of the things. And as a Black woman, another thing too, my mom told me is do not cry in front of them. Go to the bathroom if you need to cry. Because sometimes I get so angry. I never cry.
I do the same thing. I'm a crier. Yeah.
I never. It's crazy. When I get sad, I don't really cry. It's when I get really, really angry, that's when I cry. And my mom said, never cry in front of them. Go to the bathroom, do what you need to do, fix your makeup, but never show them your emotions, because they're gonna try and pin it on you and make it seem like it's a weakness. Even in reality, showing emotions is not a weakness, but they do that in the workspace.
Yeah, absolutely. See, that's super intense, and it's kind of crazy because we're trying to explain the dynamic of race and sexism at the same time, and esports is barely even understanding the sexism part right now. So I was thinking, how would you kind of talk about it at the broader level? Because one of the questions that came in was asking if there's any games that you avoid, and I've seen a ton of videos where games are kind of their voice chat's kind of toxic. And have you experienced that playing COD? I'm pretty sure COD doesn't have a great representation for things like sexism. So,
oh yeah, I mean, I get everything from it's this is funny, but it's also not funny. Because I have a low pitched voice, sometimes I think I'm just a teenage boy, and I'm like, all right, cool, whatever. I'm like, I'll take that. As long as you don't come at me, tell me to go in the kitchen, fine. If you think I'm a teenage boy. But I usually don't. I usually play these games and mute everyone. And I only talk to people I play with, because I play games because I enjoy it. I want to have fun. It's and also it's a way for me to escape from some of the things I have to deal with in work and more. I'm not trying to leave a space and go to another one where I have to deal with some of the same stuff. So I make sure I always mute everyone. You can talk smack all you want. I'm not going to hear you, nor do I care. I'm just here to have fun. Now, some of my friends leave it up because they want to get their frustration out and be like, yeah, you suck. But I'm the opposite. I will just mute you. And so I always make sure that when I'm playing with friends. So then I don't have, or it'll be followers that over time I realize that they're really nice people. And so I'll play with them, but I'll never jump into a game with a random, because I've seen too many clips and moments where someone realized that someone was Black and then they just went off, and I'm not trying to deal with that. I'm just trying to have a fun time.
Yeah, thank goodness League didn't have voice chat for the years I played. That's why I really liked PC gaming, because I was always in text chat, and I'm like, I can do this, I can vibe in solo queue. So I really like loner gaming, and it's a fun thing to do. I think the next question that came in was actually for me. They were asking if I have ever been outnumbered in a time where there has been an accusation of racism, and if anyone stuck up for me. So I tried really hard to avoid people accusing people of racism, because in my collegiate years, I was running a student club, and I was in a role that's usually taken up by men. And I was running the competitive end of our club, so I didn't want to argue with I didn't want to argue with a bunch of guys by myself, because anytime I brought something up, they would just try to like pull rank and go to somebody else instead of me, even though it was my call. So I tried to, what I did, I had a strategy for this. I just funneled everything into other people. I would get the guys in my club to say things for me, which is very unfortunate. I hope we can grow past the point of me having to do something like that. But because I was outnumbered, I wouldn't outright accuse anybody of anything. I would just kind of funnel it through somebody else and leave it up to the rules if I could, make sure that the books were good. And I think that that's like one of those hoops that you were talking about. It has to do with there not being too many of us. Would you say, Erin, that there's anybody that you looked up to when you were pursuing your profession that kind of made you feel like you belonged?
Well, in terms of, when I first started with my career, I never once did I think about having a broadcast or just any career in esports and gaming. That was just not something that we're given as or shown as an opportunity across the board. Because also right now there's no specific path towards professional career. So in terms of like broadcasting stuff. So I never really looked at that. But for when I first started out in traditional sport, I have one of my mentors is Mike Hill. And he used to do broadcast work for ESPN, and he does it for Fox Sports. And he introduced me to people like Jamel Hill and some other black journalists and broadcasters in the space. And so I looked up to them because they were very honest in the sense where they told me, even for traditional sports media, they're like, it's very difficult for Black women to rise up in this space. And there's very little room for you to make mistakes. And there were just certain lessons that they taught me that I've applied. Like, I mean, if you are Black, we are all given the chalk when we're kids, right? The chalk is essentially that you are. It's the earliest conversations around racism, and it's the earliest conversation that you're given as a kid that your parents or loved ones basically tell you that there are people who are not going to value you as a person or your life, and that's just what we have to deal with, right? And so. Because of that, I've had various different talks throughout my experience. And some of those are professional talks where they literally say, listen, when it comes to broadcasting, especially in traditional sports, they're not really like it's harder as a Black woman. And if you're a Black woman, you have to look a certain way and be a certain way. And so it was like those people I really looked up to. And I have to say, like, there have been amazing people in the community who've helped to guide me and be a friend. And they've always been amazing, like Amanda Stevens, Brandon Brathwaite, the Cheddar Esports team, my friend Judy, Jet Set, NARS. The New York City community is just so supportive and amazing, and they've been great in the sense that they knew that I had experience in media, but there are certain areas of esports that I just wasn't as knowledgeable about because it just wasn't like a scene that I watched. Like, I tell people all the time, I didn't really know so much about League of Legends because I didn't grow up playing League of Legends, right? But I was more like an FPS person. But, people weren't like, oh, well then, you can't talk or you can't do anything. Like, no, you can learn about these games. You can learn about different things. And, of course I played it and everything. And, it's not entirely my cup of tea, but at least I play it. And so it's that embracive approach that the community gave me. And that's just something that I've always tried to do as someone who's established in this industry now. Like, I try to embrace, I try to answer questions, I try to help people because the same way that I had to navigate this space, the same way that everyone else had to navigate this space, there are other people that are trying to figure it out as well. And gatekeeping is not going to help this industry. Gatekeeping is ridiculous. And it's just people who want to hold on to something that either because they're fearful that it's going to change away from what they want, or they're just like not good people to begin with. And so that's why it's so important that we constantly support one another, constantly give as much information and uplift one another. And I had amazing people in the community do that. I had amazing people outside the community do that. And it set the tone for my career. And so it also set the tone for me paying it forward and doing the same and trying to help people in whatever way I can.
Yeah, paying it forward is extremely important. I also have a mentor who's helped me out a ton, and I think that having that support system is really important, especially like when you said you're a minority. There's a lot of things that we are thinking about that other people aren't thinking about, and sometimes we need to kind of check ourselves and make sure we're on the right track. It all starts really early, I've noticed. would you say that there are any resources that you would recommend to children? Because now gaming is becoming more unisex and more unified, and young girls are getting into gaming, especially young Black girls who may feel like they're underrepresented and not as prominent in the community. What do you recommend for their parents or for their teachers or whoever else might be guiding them?
Well, one, I wish the show was still going on, but you can actually go back to the website. There's a lot of people we interviewed for Cheddar Esports, and that's a great place to start. We've interviewed devs, people who work on marketing, talent management, pro players, people who work on production. It's a wide variety of people that you can actually go to cheddar.com and you go to the Cheddar Esports section, and all of our old interviews are there. So that's a great way to learn about just more opportunities in this space. And then there are several organizations, nonprofits like AnyKey, Community with an X instead of an O. They work with a lot of K through 12 and HBCUs in Atlanta. There's also people like Geekleets that is a company in the Dallas area, and they have been actually helping players in the Dallas area go pro in the NBA 2K League, and have been providing resources and information. So that's another great place. I think that there are other like reporters and journalists who have varying different degrees of how they talk about things. Everything from like the Nicole Carpenters to Jacob Wolf to Bijan Stefan. There's various different people that can help you with learning. I think that the one important thing is like there's not quite one place of news and information that parents can really learn and understand. That's something that needs to change, honestly. I mean, with Cheddar Esports, we tried to do that while also catering to the hardcore fans. But with it shutting down, there's an opportunity for other spaces to kind of fill that void, and people to fill that void. Also, there's a platform called eFuse that I've been working with, where I've been doing a lot of educational content. So people on the platform, can learn about it. So I think that, unfortunately, because there's not one centralized area, also checking out streams like this. And I think that it's just try to take in as much information as you can, whether it's via these news entities, whether it's via these live streams. And then a lot of times the kids already know where to get the information. It's usually just the parents, right? So it is part of our responsibility as the esports and gaming industry to help convey the messages and convey the information in a way that these parents can understand. But also, I think that there are a lot of parents that are taking the initiative because they see their kids, they see opportunities for their kids in this space. Like I had one of my hairdressers was like, how do I connect with my kid on Fortnite? Do I have to play it? I'm like, you don't have to even play it. You can literally watch the Fortnite World Cup or watch a stream with your child. And even that's a lot, Some of us grew up where we didn't have parents that were supportive, that are a little bit older in this scene, Luckily, I was very fortunate. My parents were very supportive because my parents are computer scientists. And my stepdad actually created one of the earliest video games for the Commodore 64. So
that's so cool.
Yeah. And he's worked with Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and all of them. So my parents always were like, this is not a waste of time, but like, make sure you get your grades up, but this is not a waste of time. So I was very fortunate for that. But those are just some of the different ways that people can get information, education, but it's also our job as part of the esports industry to provide that information as much as we can.
Yeah, I found myself having to do a lot of the teaching and see what sticks, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. It's a lot to process, right? The world's changing, and we're moving in a lot of different directions. Yeah. I wanted to bring it back to the angry Black women trope because you brought it up, and it's something that a lot of people are asking about, and they really want to know if that's ever been... So the angry Black woman, for those of you that don't know, is a stereotype about Black women when they are aggressive or loud that will say that they are not good leaders. They're just emotional, as Erin mentioned previously. But it kind of has a bit more depth. Men don't really get that treatment. It's a woman thing. So it's sexism, but it's also racism. How would you explain that? Like I guess I'm trying to figure out how to explain it in a way that makes sense to most people that aren't understanding the overlapping of race and gender.
Yeah. So the angry Black woman, as well as some of the stereotypes and tropes, some of them stem from slavery in the sense of the depiction of Black people, especially post-slavery, right? We've seen it with some of these, I can't remember the name of it, but some of these like cartoons where it's like this association like, oh, Black people like watermelon, or there's just certain stereotypes that come from a racist history that have evolved and changed in various different forms. Like, for example, the mammy, which is like, the help, is a stereotype and trope that has stemmed from back during the slavery times. So there are some that are utilized now as a way to discredit a Black woman's experience and to discredit a woman in general. And that's why, like, when people say, like, oh, you're PMSing, like, that is a way that a man discredits a woman and what she's saying, because that is them deflecting and not wanting to listen to what's being said. And so these are things that people use to discredit the experience, right? Even, for example, not too long ago, I put up on Twitter how when I was speaking out about some of these racist things that have been happening, like, I even said, like, I had someone before who told me that if I don't like what's going on, then I can just leave. Or if I didn't like the Call of Duty in-game problems, then I shouldn't play it. And I tweeted about it. And I had the nerve of someone to say, oh, show me receipts. Why do I have to show you? Because they said that I'm the only Black person who's ever experienced that, which is not true, because I asked that person, give me the receipts that shows that I'm the only Black person. And then they try to use the microaggressions as, oh, well, I have Black friends. Like, my Black friend is a pro player. Like, no, just because you use that does not justify what you said. So there are microaggressions, and there are stereotypes that people use to discredit a Black woman, a Black person, or a person of color, because they themselves don't want to listen to what that person's saying, or they do not want to understand. And so the angry Black woman is one of that. Because, like you said, if a man said it, wouldn't be a problem. If certain, and I will say, even if a white woman says certain things that a Black woman may say, they may not believe the Black woman, but they may believe the white woman. And so those are very much problems that are at the core contextually of the sexism problem that we have, as well as the racism problem. And there are historical connections to a lot of these stereotypes and just these things that people claim and say. And it's unfortunate that we still have to navigate and we have to have our emotions be a certain way, when a white male can go into a conference room and be mad and yell at everyone. But a Black woman can't do that. And so it's unfortunate, but yeah. So I would say it's these little microaggressions and stereotypes that people use to discredit others.
Yeah, so definitely a microaggression. Like, when I was thinking about the way some language would sound, like, oh, you're very extra, or something like that, it would be used towards me, and then not so much towards other people. And I would think, oh, well, why am I the extra one if I'm just excited? Or why is somebody else passionate where I am too much, right? And there was a question that was asking if you've experienced this through other women in esports. And I think that this is a really important place to have this discussion, because the only times I've been able to have this discussion was probably once or twice in all of the women in esports events I've ever been to, or engagements. Wow. I've never been able to bring this up. Yeah.
So honestly, I've been very, very lucky. My experience with women in this space has been nothing but amazing. There are definitely, unfortunately, just like in other industries which are male dominated, there are moments where there are women who look at other women as competition, because they view this industry as having limited seats, right? And if there are limited seats, it's like they got to do whatever they can to get that seat and not have someone else, because if they don't get that seat, they don't have a job. I never viewed things like that. I've never been a person who viewed other women as competition like that. I mean, the only time I ever did was when I played soccer and I was competing against another team. Like, yeah, you're my competitor. But in the workspace, like, I mean, it's, a little joke. But in the workspace, I never, because at the end of the day, any person who goes out of their way to compete, to always look at a woman as a competitor. It just speaks, honestly, it speaks more to their insecurities than it does anything else, because we have to work with each other and work with another. And that's how we'll create more opportunities and space for other women, especially more Black women. So all the women that I've worked with have been phenomenal and super supportive. And I think at the end of the day, like, I've never had a problem, and I never myself viewed other women as competitions, because I know I'm great at what I do. And I know I'm one of the very few hosts in this space that does what I do. And, you know, me helping others get into this space is not going to take away opportunities from me. I mean, look at people who've been helping to create opportunities for other people and have elevated them, and look how it's elevated them, like Oprah, and there's other people. You know, helping others actually helps you, because, like, what if you do run out of a job, right? Your kindness, your compassion, you caring actually will have more people trying to help you. You know, because, like, for me, I've always tried to help people as much as I can. And the response I got from people when I said that I got laid off from Cheddar, the response I got from people who wanted to help me was mind blowing. And I never help people seeking something in return. I help people out of the kindness of my heart. And even if it's, you know, we're in the same career, I'm still going to help you, because that's the way that we can create more opportunities for Black women and women in this space. We have to, and we have to support one another. And if one of them speaks up, we have to support them as well. And so that's always how I've been. But I mean, I'm sure I've had maybe like one or two women that looked at me as a competitor and all that stuff, but I don't care. Like, if you're a racist, you get out of my sight. If you are sexist, get out of my sight. If you're looking at me as competition all the time, get out of my sight. I don't want to deal with you. Like, I'm only keeping people in my circle who are about helping each other and helping people, and especially helping Black people. If you're not about that, if I gotta work with you, cool, but don't talk to me after. That's just how I am. And I know I'm being very blunt right now, but I feel like it's important to just be that way right now and not have these, like, these sugar-coated
beating around the bush.
Yeah. It doesn't help anyone having these sugar-coated conversations. And so, but that's why it's so important to, like, just be a nice person. It really doesn't take that much energy to be a nice person. And I feel like being a nice person genuinely does so much more for your career than if you're constantly trying to step over people and just be mean. Like, there's no point in that.
Yeah, like a rising tide will sail all ships, right? And I think what you were talking about, it just shows, like, it showcases that you have a very strong level of confidence, because it takes a lot of confidence to be able to say, I'm great at what I do and I want to help others get there, instead of drag and pull them down. And I had another question. It's a little bit longer, but it's a really good one. So given that a lot of professional esports and the gaming industry exists in communities that are already more progressive, what do you think is the root of racism and sexism in the professional space? And more importantly, how do you deal with educating people who feel like they're in the position of knowledge to tackle what they are tackling? So I'm guessing what they're trying to say is, how do you deal with people who are already being very progressive and liberal and not realizing that they have these racist undertones that we're talking about?
Okay.
It's a big one.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's all about intentions, right? There are people who have really good intentions, but they may not be going about it the best way in terms of communicating. For me, especially if I know them, I'm someone who's good at reading character, right? I'm not going to, unfortunately, you can't waste your time in terms of trying to educate someone who's not going to change their ways, and who's if they're going to be racist and sexist, they're going to be racist and sexist unless they change it themselves. The only thing you can do is call them out on it, but you can't sit there and actually educate them. You have to, when you navigate this space, you have to learn who are the ones who are coming from a genuine approach and who aren't. And sometimes that line is hard, right? But for me, I go off of just personal experiences and everything like that, right? And I've seen some people who have put out tweets, in solidarity of what was going on with the police brutality and the protests. But the way that they framed the question was tone deaf, right? Or excuse me, framed the tweet was tone deaf. But The one thing I've learned by going to school in Kentucky is that sometimes racist thoughts and ignorant thoughts can be two separate things. And someone being ignorant does not necessarily mean that they're racist. And that's where you have to have that educational component. Because, like, I went to school with kids in college that never saw a Black person face to face until they went to college. And there are people who have these communities where all they're around is the ethnicity that they are, and they don't know better. And unfortunately, the only information they have is what they see in media. And we all know how not fair representation is in media when it comes to different ethnicities, right? So,
absolutely.
If there's someone that I feel like is willing to have these conversations and is willing for me to point out like something that they said that was ignorant, I will have that conversation. If someone is blatantly racist, I'm gonna call them out and call them racist. But like you, I'm very mindful of when I say someone's racist, right? Because like I said, there are some people who are just ignorant, and I don't think that it is necessarily that they're racist. It's just that they don't know better, right? And part of it is that we do have to educate, but then when there is a little bit of education, it's also their responsibility to continue educating themselves. So you can't change everyone, you can't fix everyone, but for those who are willing to learn about their mistakes and willing to hear out, I will go about my way and speak to them and have those conversations. And it's super important that we do that. The same way that like when there are other issues or just stories or things that come up with other people of color, like I'll talk to a friend, right? Like, for example, the Hong Kong protests. I didn't know entirely what was going on over there. So I spoke to certain friends and say, hey, I would like to learn more from your perspective, right? And sometimes it takes us actively doing that than just to go out and just say whatever, right? Because as a journalist, like I need information and facts to put out a well thought out statement, right? Or a thought. Because it's my job as a broadcaster to make sure that the information is correct that we're giving out. I always make sure to talk to my friends and always make sure to talk to people. And I do my own research too. Like even like with just the support that more support that we're seeing from people. But like even before, I try to support the trans community as much as I can. I myself will never understand certain things that happen in that community because I myself am not trans, but I take the time to learn and I speak to my trans friends and I read up on things and I look at videos to from a basic human level be able to understand. And so that's what you have to find that balance. And over time it's hard because like I said, sometimes people who are ignorant are racist, and then some people who are just ignorant aren't racist. And you just have to see, you got to pick your battles where you can really help people and change people and educate them, and where you just got to be like, forget you.
Yeah, you can't just assume that everybody knows as much as you know. And I think that's where some people do go wrong. And you're right, it is up to people as individuals to be responsible, because even during Hong Kong, there were a lot of things I couldn't say because of geography. I'm here and there's not a lot that I understand. I don't want to overspeak on a subject that I don't have too much knowledge on, right? And I wanted to kind of bring that and pull that back into esports and gaming. Which companies would you say kind of had a great handle on how they were dealing with Black Lives Matter? Because you mentioned tone deaf, and I think there were a number of instances where, I'm not going to name drop, but there were some tone deaf responses to the situation.
It's interesting. I got asked this question before, and it's a multi-layered answer that I'm going to give. Because even for the people that did give, so definitely for the people who actually had actionable measures in their solidarity posts, right? Like, but ones that made sense, like not tweeting for 8 minutes and a few seconds is not, what does that do, right? That's not a solidarity thing to do. And there was a company that did that. Also, for even the ones that did put their money where their mouth is, great. What is your long-term plan? For me, I'm happy that these companies are speaking out and they're doing things. But there's also, like, for example, Activision, right? Call of Duty, you guys, I'm sure they've known how bad the racism and the in-game chat has been. And I'm sure they're very well aware that people have been using the N-word as part of their usernames. Like, I don't want to just see, like, yes, putting money is great, but I want to know what you're doing, not just today, not just tomorrow, for the next year, for the next 3, the 5, 10. Like, I want to know what your long-term plans are. A lot of companies are putting out down short-term plans. But for me, I'm still holding everyone accountable, even though I'm very happy that they gave solidarity posts, and I'm very happy that people have also donated money. But I'm still holding them accountable because when the news cycle ends and the news isn't really talking about the protests as much, which is starting to happen, what are you doing? What are you doing long term? That's what I want to know. I've been lucky enough to know some information about what companies are doing just behind the scenes. Obviously, I can't speak on it, but for the ones that I do know, it gives me reassurance that companies are thinking long term and are not just having it be a trend, right? Because that was the big concern is everyone going to jump on to be a trend? Because it's like, our company needs to put out solidarity posts because either I hope they were doing it because they want to, but I also know some people are probably putting out where it's like, we have to do it because everyone else is doing it. If we don't do it, we look racist, right? So I just want to know what their long-term plans are. And I also want to know how active are they going to be with, especially not only the Black community, but if they want to help Black communities, then I would like to see them also work with HBCUs. A lot of college programs are being developed at every other university. Why don't we have the same thing at HBCUs? So these are just some of the things in terms of like what the companies are doing. But for me, it's still about holding everyone accountable. And disparity, financial support, lack of exposure, education, information have always been pain points. So it's no more making excuses and it's no more like not do anything. Like, I want to see what the long-term actions are moving forward. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
An HBCU is a historically Black college and university.
Yeah, that was one where my ignorance, excuse me, because I'm Canadian, so we don't have very many HBCUs here as they do in the United States.
Yeah.
And I actually, I didn't even pay attention to the lack of representation in college esports, because you're right, there's programs at like so many schools. There's even Canadian schools with programs. Why are HBCUs not being given the same attention? And what is the barrier that's holding them back? Because sometimes it could be an issue of accessibility. And what are these companies doing about it? I actually got a question just now about the backlash against speaking up and name dropping people. So it's not so much that I'm against name dropping. I absolutely will call things out when I see them. But there are a lot of times where I've received backlash for using my own personal account to address these things. And have you ever seen the same thing, Erin, where you'll bring something up and kind of...
Oh, no. Kind of bring up okay, repeat that. You went off for a second. All right, I think I have a little bit of a gist of what you're bringing up in terms of the backlash. So I think every mass change and every big change is going to, you're going to have people that are going to oppose, right? I think the one thing is, especially with the gaming and esports industries, there's a lot of wiggle room, but there's a lot of people that utilize anonymous accounts to say things. I think recently someone on Reddit was, as part of like a CSGO Reddit, was trying to say some really not so great things about the fact that there are companies that are in support of Black Lives Matter and everything like that. And so I think that it's easier to be a follower than it is to be a leader, right? And I think for people who are utilizing their platforms to speak up and everything like that, understand that there will be backlash to it, because the short-term backlash of a random Twitter account that has the face of, let's just say, a cow, and their name is Moo Moo, saying that like what I said isn't correct. Like, I don't like, for me, it's like, if you don't agree with what I'm saying, then how about you show your face, show your name, and also add your employer, because I have mine on my social media. You show yours. People are very courageous on the internet, but they're never that courageous in person. And so for me, I never take it personally. There are sometimes I get upset, but for the most part, I understand what those people's intentions are when they're anonymous. And sometimes those are bots. They're not even regular human beings. So for me, the ability to use my platform and to speak up on things that need to be talked about and the positive outcome that can come from that will always outweigh the negativity. Like I always, listen, even if I don't speak up, even if I just be myself, I'm still going to have someone who's not going to like me and who's going to say something, because at the end of the day, I'm Black. So they're not going to like me anyway. So if they don't like me, they probably don't even like me because I am Black. So I don't care about those people. So that's why it's for me, I make sure that anytime I speak up on important matters, I'm very concise and I always have information and I do what I can. And even that backlash is never, ever going to supersede the positivity and support that I've gotten from speaking up and doing the right thing. And it can be scary because who wants to have people like cuss them out, call them N-word and say that stuff. But I think for me, it's like, that's been happening all my life. People have been coming in and calling me the N-word, saying all these things, telling me to go back into the kitchen. So what are they going to do? Say the same thing that they've been saying and think that it's creative that they're calling me the N-word? So I think that's why I'm like, and me working on myself with that self-care and having that foundation and knowing like, no, I'm an amazing person. I'm a kind and generous person. And no matter what they say, it's not going to change. Because at the end of the day, not everyone's going to like you. And so I think that's what has helped me with speaking up a lot more. And then, having other people in the industry speak up or even defend you is something else that kind of helps with the process as well. So yeah.
Yeah. Like even as you said, beyond the news cycle, this is going to be something that we need to keep talking about, but there's still news on it. I think that's what people aren't noticing is that there are still stories that are popping up of violence against women and violence against women during the BLM movement too, like Oluwatoyin Salau and what happened to her. It was really sad and tragic. And I don't know if you had any issues with your platform and speaking up on the issue during that period, or if it was, if you wanted to share some extra difficulties you may have had at that time.
I didn't have any difficulties because more so for my agents, I was never going to sign with someone who didn't understand who I am as a person at my core. And I already straight up told my agents, listen, I speak out on social issues. Sometimes I can be very blunt. Even when I communicate with them, sometimes I'm really blunt. And I'm like, this is me though. And if you can deal with me and you accept me and you support me, that's all that matters. So I made sure that before I had daily management assistants, before I even signed my agents, I made sure that they were aware of who I am, what I do, and where I want to go. And that's so important. That goes back to having the right people in your circle, because everything and I took it upon myself, and I understood myself too, that me speaking out, I wanted to do that, and I took that risk, even if that means that I may not get certain gig. I don't care, because finding a job or doing any kind of work in broadcasting, I can always find that. That's what my agents are for, right? But speaking up for what's important and what's right will always, always be the most important thing. It will always be the most important thing. And sometimes, and we have to understand that for positive change and for change that goes, when it comes to sexism and racism, sometimes there will be loss in order to gain more. And so I understood that. And that's why with my message, I always am very aware of what I say and how I say it and how I convey my message, right? And a lot of the stuff that I've been saying, I've been having calls and one-on-ones, people behind the scenes saying the same thing. Like, it's never going to be like who I am behind the scenes is different from in front. No, who I am is who you see. And so everyone's very well aware of that. And they know that everything that I'm saying comes from a genuine a place, and it comes from my heart, So I haven't had any problems per se. Honestly, I've gotten more work. And I don't know if that coincides or not. That's something that I just will never know the true answer to. But I do have a lot of people reaching out about like, okay, oh, we want to improve the industry and we love to work with you to improve the industry. So yeah, I think that, I don't know, my parents always told me to do the right thing and to speak up when it, especially, even if others don't agree, like speak up for what's right. And I'm willing to deal with I wouldn't even say consequences. I'm willing to deal with just certain opportunities not coming my way because of it, but it hasn't done anything. And my agents have been supportive, and everyone that I work with has been supportive, and they all feel like it's the right thing to do as well. So I didn't have any issues speaking up, to be honest.
That's good. That's good to hear. How would you say you balance not reading the comments with actually engaging with your community and making sure that you're well aware of what's going on with them? Because like you said, they're very supportive.
Well, one, I have my own Discord server. So that's where people can come and like talk to me, and on a more like on a deeper level. Because I don't really like on Twitter and Instagram, like I like, I show aspects of myself, but I still don't show everything. I go a little bit deeper in Discord. So that's where I in terms of the community. And then also in terms of like what I don't read and what I do read. I mean, obviously, for certain things, like certain video content and broadcasts, I'll read, and then some I'm like, I'm not reading this. Like, I don't care, right? There's certain broadcasts I don't even look at the chat. Some broadcasts I do. But it kind of goes, so one of my favorite books is called The Four Agreements. Yeah. And one of the philosophies in the Four Agreements is, one, don't take everything personally, and two, don't make assumptions, right? So it goes back to the fact that how people treat you and how they react to you is a reflection of themselves, and it's not a reflection of you. Obviously, if you did something wrong to someone and they talk about it and stuff, that's different. But typically how people react in terms of not being nice to you or saying the N-word or doing crazy things in the chat, it's never a reflection of me. It's always a reflection of them and how they are. They could be having a bad day. They could be a really crappy person. But understanding that actually has helped me in terms of my reactions to the comments. Like, I don't get upset and I don't take it personally. And that's also another concept of the book, is don't take it personally. And then also don't make assumptions, because sometimes, sometimes people don't know how to always process their emotions and feelings. And sometimes people put it out on other people and they project it out on other people. But sometimes being kind back to someone who's not being nice can change things and can show people like, what you thought about me or how you treated me. I didn't deserve it because I'm a nice person and I'm showing you kindness and niceness, even though I don't have to, right? It's a psychological thing. I'm very much into psychology too. So that book has really helped me with being able to handle and deal with some of these negative comments. I mean, sometimes I get upset, granted, I'm a human being, but I really just don't focus in on the negativity, and I focus in on more of the positivity, because granted, I may get like 3 tweets that are like people being rude, but I'll get like 100 that are more positive. Why focus on those 3 tweets when there's 100 people that are supporting you, and also some people that are asking for help, and you can change someone's life by answering that. And the mute button, it's amazing. The mute and block button, I stay using that. Like, if you talk to me crazy, I don't have to listen to you. Boop, 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 bye. And you'll never know that I will never see your comments again. So that's a great tool as well.
I do utilize mute over block because I noticed that there's some people who like being blocked. So I have to use the mute because it doesn't give any notification, doesn't tell anybody, and no one will ever know that they're muted. And it's perfect because you don't have to see anything.
Some people deserve the block, but then usually those people, they'll tweet about it, be like, oh, I got this person to block. But it's just like, they want attention. And it's
what are you celebrating?
I don't know. People do. It's the internet. People do weird things.
Yeah. Strongly advocate for self-help books too. I think they're great. I read some and they're really awesome. I have another question that came in that asked, for Black people or women who stay silent about these societal issues because they fear their job may be jeopardized. If they speak out, do they have a responsibility to help advance the status of Black people in society? And how can they make their voice heard or have an impact?
Okay, so
that's a big one.
In terms of making an impact, this is a misconception I think people have when it comes to speaking out, right? It's not about how many followers you have, right? In terms of change, right? Like, let's look at the civil rights movement. Everyone had a specific role, right? You had obviously the likes of Martin Luther King Jr., who is one of the prominent leaders. Then you have the people that support the leader. Then you have the people who, did other things. There's different kind of roles and responsibilities that come with that come with change. And so you don't have to always be the person who is constantly tweeting and speaking out and all that stuff. Like, maybe it's about highlighting and sharing some of the people who are, right? Maybe it is you yourself can financially support during these initiatives. But for those who want to speak out, I think it's important to note that it's not about like having hundreds and hundreds of thousands of followers. It's about how can you impact the people who are in your circle and immediately around it, right? The only difference is for someone like me who's a public figure, I'm able to impact other public figures. So yeah, my reach could be farther, but it doesn't mean that my reach is greater or how I'm conveying my message is greater than yours just because you have fewer followers or whatever. You shouldn't put a value on that. It's about who you can change and what kind of change you can make. Sometimes guys, some of the smallest changes in history have made the biggest impact. So never worry about like how many people are hearing or et cetera. Like, focus on who you can change in your immediate circle, whether it's your family members, whether it's your Twitch community or anything like that. And it'll have a trickling effect because guess what? Those people are going to go and talk to people in their circle. And some people are going to talk to their Twitch communities and it's going to resonate. I think that when you focus in on just speaking up and less about how far it goes, like you'd be surprised how far it really goes. Like, for example, I interviewed Dr. Lupo. I never knew that I was someone that impacted Dr. Lupo. I never thought that. And I was someone that he put on his, when he put out his tweet saying that he needs to, he hasn't done a good enough job supporting Black content creators and professionals in the space, and he wants to do that. And he's like, I want to share some people because of who they are. They're amazing, people. And he had my name on it. Never did I ever like, I never spoke up for the sake of people telling other people to follow me. I never did that. I spoke up because it's the right thing to do. But me speaking up, and even me as a host, I have a smaller Twitter following than most hosts do in this industry. Me speaking up, I didn't even realize how far it went and how it reached people like Dr. Lupo. So you never know who you can reach when you speak up. And that's why it's so important to just, if you feel like it's the right thing to do, then utilize the platforms that you have to speak up. And if there's someone who's bigger, who's speaking up, definitely elevate them and be part of like streams like this. Be part of nonprofits and organizations that can help with you speaking up through actions and everything like that. There's so many different ways for change. I think that's important to note. There's not just one way. There's multiple ways. And there's multiple ways to really impact via your words as well.
Yeah, definitely. Because I noticed a lot of people were criticizing people who are, I guess, in their words, silent. What would you say about that?
I think that we are at a point where if you are silent and you don't do anything, absolutely nothing, you are part of the problem. And I've said that to even some friends. I'm like, if you don't say anything, that's fine. But if like, because there are certain people that literally like they can't say anything legally, right? And I understand that. But like, if you don't, even if you don't like DM me, did you donate? Did you do anything, right? If you don't do anything, you're part of the problem because you're being complicit. And being complicit and allowing things to happen mean you are signaling that you're okay with what's happening. So there's no room for that, right? Because even like there are people that are like, well, people's livelihoods if they speak up and da-da-da. And another thing too, I'm like, well, what about the livelihood of people who are getting murdered, who are getting killed, via police brutality? What about their families? They can't provide for their family anymore. There are kids who no longer have parents because of what's happening, right? You're not the only, like the selfish mindset is part of the reason why we still have these problems. It's like people don't want to address the problems because it's not impacting them or they don't want it to impact their well-being, their family. And so they brush it under the rug. But that attitude's not going to solve anything. And there's always something you can do, right? I've been telling people there's always something you can do. If you want to be educated, reach out to someone. If someone says no, you got to be okay with that. But you have to actively do it. Don't take it personally. If you don't want to, if you can't for some reason legally speak up, donate money. Help a friend behind the scenes with an initiative or a nonprofit or anything. Like, there are things that you can do. But I think that as people who are public figures like myself, it's important for us to speak up. And another thing too, if you in some shape or form have profited off of Black culture, Black people, and the Black community, you better say something. And also put your money where your mouth is. Like, there's no excuse anymore. There's no excuse.
I agree. Especially with esports, like all the swaggy outfits and you could tell where the inspiration comes from.
Yeah, using Black athletes, using hip-hop artists for investment. Like, come on. If you guys are doing that, you better be doing something. Like, no. Mm-mm.
Absolutely. It's definitely a difficult subject to tackle because, like you said, people are constantly thinking about fending for themselves, and it's the whole point of social justice is to defend the people who can no longer defend themselves and who died for these horrible reasons. And I wanted to move more into you personally and your role as a host. Is there anyone that you wanted to speak to, an interview, and that you were looking forward to that could kind of shed some light on what's going on right now?
Well, there are people who I've interviewed already that have been speaking on these things, whether it's diversity or inclusion. There's Tanya, Cypher Tier on Twitter, awesome. We have Andy, who's Escoblades, who's part of Ubisoft, and him and Kirsten and Leon with their Black Pro Gamers mixer been working. There's been various different people, and I think that the thing is like there have been people that have been speaking on these things forever. I think it's just now because of quarantine that people are actually, some people, not all, but some people are actually listening. And so I think that it's not even about interviewing someone. Like, I would want to, if I could give them more exposure and help to convey their message and what they're trying to do to change the industry or just to change things in general, like I definitely would want to do. And I also want to be able to give a platform for those who maybe not have been able to speak out before, but are willing and want to speak out with me about it. So those are kind of like some of the people that I think we should continue to elevate. And those are the same people who've helped to support me and even protect me when I was speaking out as well. And so whatever I can do to continue to do the same for them, like I would definitely do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, you mentioned the mixer, and I know that you also had something that you were working on. Did you want to tell us more about it?
Yeah, of course. So guys, next Wednesday, I put together a free educational informational session, live stream session. It's called In the Game. And what I did was I got some of my friends who are broadcasters, casters, commentators, as well as production staff to lend their time for free to answer questions and to give everyone who's watching free information to help them with entering this space and or pursuing a career in esports and gaming broadcast. So I even have people like Golden Boy who are providing, a few other friends as well. We have Michelle Morrow, Malik Forte, my friend Brandon who worked for Cheddar Esports. We have Jason Baker who's been doing a lot of production work in esports for a very long time. Miss Harvey. We also have Jamerson who's been in the Apex and all of them, right? But I wanted to make sure it was a diverse group, right? I made sure we had Black representation, a representative of the Asian community, a representative of the LGBTQIA plus community, women, older individuals, right? I wanted to make sure it was as diverse as possible, and I worked so hard to put together the right group so that the information can apply to anyone that's watching. But I also been doing this in partnership with eFuse Community, the nonprofit that's going to be sending it to various K through 12 high schoolers, as well as historically Black colleges and university students. And then I also been working with some other nonprofits to get this information, because one of the best ways that we can change this industry is by giving free information out. And that's the first thing that we can do. So it's this Wednesday. It's going to be on Axis Replays, twitch.tv/Axis Replay. But I'm also going to be dropping the full session on my YouTube channel, and also and it's going to be streamed on Twitter as well. Shout out to Rishi, who's part of Twitter Gaming. I spoke to him about this. So he's been helping me with being able to amplify it on Twitter and to stream it on Twitter as well. So there'll be multiple ways that you guys can check it out. If you can't make the live stream, there will be the whole VOD after as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's really awesome what you're working on, and like just the emphasis on like the free knowledge and education is very important, because if we're not teaching others how to improve, then what are we doing with our with the extra time that we have now? I think it's amazing that you're putting these initiatives together and worrying about these things, because you got to do it or no one else will, right? And
exactly.
Yeah, and I wanted to get into some more audience questions, because there were a few more rolling in. This one's a bit more legislative, and it asks, for systemic racism, there are clear legislative actions that can be taken to help advance the position of Black people. In professional gaming and esports community, are there similar solutions that the government can take to make the industry more equal, or societal change? Is societal change the only solution? That's a really good question.
Oh man,
that's a loaded one, but it's really good.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I mean, always societal legislation is going to be needed and important because it impacts esports, but also esports is, okay, at the end of the day, it's a business, right? And it's also influenced by the very brands that are non-endemic brands that are putting money into this industry. So the social legislation is important, but the implementation of certain things that are needed in esports that can help with the protection of those in this space, for example, player unions. That's something that needs to get done that hasn't really been done. I think also, we have various different legislation, for example, that requires for women to be integrated in Title IX. Excuse me. There you go. Title IX. That as well needs to be in association with esports accordingly too, to help with bringing more women to this space and allowing for all women events and all women teams to manifest, because it's not to separate the men from the women and etc. It's to create these comfortable pathways for people to come in. I think that as esports progresses, even from a collegiate standpoint, there should be some kind of, I'm not someone who is like, I do not think like so here in the US, right, the NCAA, I don't agree about having the NCAA involved, but there needs to be some kind of governing concept for collegiate esports to make sure that programs are run fairly and people are treated accordingly. And so I think that that's going to be something that's important. So some of the things that we see in terms of like Title IX and some other legislation that applies to traditional sports, we should be seeing that applying for esports as well. Also, for like people who are like production staff, those unions I think that we should also see as well, because a good amount of people who work in esports right now are predominantly contractors and freelancers. So that we have to make sure that they are getting paid for what they earned, right? Because there's still that issue of people not being paid, like, publications only paying like $10 per like 100 words or something crazy, right? That needs to change. So there needs to be some of the same legislation that we see applying to other industries need to be implemented in esports. But I also think that esports itself needs to develop better governing, concise, all across the board documents and information so that things are done appropriately. Now it's going to be hard because some of the legal matters that are happening, like for example in Europe and Asia for esports, is going to be a lot different, obviously, than over here. But I mean, the same way that like basketball in China is going to be different or run differently than basketball in the US or basketball in Canada. So
exactly,
that's why we have to have these specific country documents and governing certain governing legislation or information, so that we can make sure that some of these social matters don't continue to be a problem in esports. But I think that overall, like, our government legislation has a major impact, because think about it, part of the money that gets feeded into the esports is part of it stems from what the government does in terms of big Fortune 500 companies and big companies, right? And it's kind of like a weird thing where it's like, even with how much the government gives these companies in terms of ruling power and what they can and cannot do. But I think the first step to do is to educate each other in esports. You know, understand the legalities of a majority minority owner, right? Understand certain loopholes and information in contracts. Understand that you should always have a lawyer when you have contracts, right? I think there's basic things that we can start to help with educating so that we don't see these constant problems. But like, it's definitely going to require like governmental legislation to really change, to enforce, I would say, to really enforce certain things. Because if it's just done by like us in the esports, it doesn't mean that everyone across the board is going to be enforcing these specific rules and legislations.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really that's a lot of great information, because you're right, it's an infrastructural problem, and like I have a legal background, so I'm able to say, hey, like I know that that's not okay, but some people do have to lawyer up, and we should get rid of the stigma behind wanting a lawyer present for those types of things. Some people feel like they're doing somebody wrong, but it's any respectable employer is gonna want you to do things the right way. So it shouldn't be a shameful thing to want to do. And like, even with like expecting you get compensated on time and other things like that, freelancers get taken advantage of. I freelance too, so I feel you. And yeah, I definitely I know that we kind of covered a lot today, and it's been pretty hectic because we were all over the place on topics, and I always try to think about where yeah, like it's been a lot to take in. I always try to think about the things that you mentioned, like representation, making sure that you're the one that's out there doing the things for the people to be involved. And like with your Cheddar interview with me, that actually changed a lot of things for me. That changed the game for me. Like I didn't see anybody that looked like me before. And I was like, oh, that's super cool. Somebody that looks like me doing something that I might potentially want to do. So it made a really big difference and impact in my life too. And I'm just really happy that I could do the same thing here today and get more of your experience out there for communities that are growing, like students who need to learn from you. And I just wanted to thank you for giving us the time, and also for answering all of those complex questions. You did it really well, and you did it tastefully. Is there anything that you want to leave the students with? I always try to give them a bit of advice. It's not going to be like a catch-all thing, but something to think about, something hard. Yeah.
In your career journey, obviously people are going to tell you to work hard, right? But the most important thing is to work smart. Because I do tell people that working hard is very crucial and it's important for the growth of a career. But like, if you work hard and all you're doing is running around in a circle, where are you really going, right? So plan things accordingly. Be very precise and know, like, obviously you guys being young, you don't need to know what you want to do or where you want to go yet. But once you do know, have a firm understanding, map out where you want to go, map out a 1 year, 12 month, 3 years, 5 year, 10-year plan. Just know that like things can change, but having an understanding of where you want to go and where you are currently and what you need to do to get there, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to continue your career and work hard with direction. I think that's so important to do. Always work hard, but with direction. Because if you work hard aimlessly, you may end up right back at square one where you were originally. So always make sure you're smart and plan things accordingly. And if you got to change the plans, that's fine. But just have a sense and direction of where you're going at the end of the day.
Yeah, and can we also ask where we can reach you if the students would like to get in touch, and just kind of plug your socials for everyone so they can keep up to date with what you're up to and your upcoming event.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to type it right here as well. I mean, it's going to highlight my name, but literally my Twitch name is my social media name across the board. Erin A. Simon for Erin Ashley Simon. So you can find me on Twitter, Instagram. You can find me on the Discord. The Discord is posted on my Twitch streams. But you can also ask me on Twitter as well. I have my DMs open. Mind you, sometimes I'm late to respond to the DM, so I apologize. But I do try to respond to every single person who contacts me. And so you can find me there. I also have a website, erinasimon.com. So if you need to like email me for something, like if you would like me to speak at your college or anything like that, you can go through my website and email me, and myself and my management, either one of us will come across it. So, and I try to respond as quickly as possible. So just know that my social media door is always open. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to tweet me or message me or anything like that. And I'll try to help in whatever way I can.
Yeah, thank you so much, Erin. Thank you for your time. We appreciate you. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Can you guys just give some, I know we can't do like a physical round of applause, but can you drop some emojis in there, some fire emojis and some clapping for Erin?
Hey, look at that. Heart. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, wait,
Yes.
I have a complicated heart. Mine's like this. It's like...
You have a complicated heart.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. This?
Yeah. There you go.
That's like a visor.
You know the Korean heart, like this one? I did it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's really cute.
Oh, man, but thank you guys so much. Really do appreciate it. Thank you for all the hearts. Thank you for, listening. I know that you guys, you don't have to be here. You are here. You want to be here. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thanks.
No problem.
All right, everybody, we're heading off now. Enjoy the rest of the stream.